Hello class! Today I would like you to take Cornell notes on this lecture and we'll discuss them in class as part of our BBK. So the thing we're talking about today is endangered species and how humans are contributing to more and more endangered species and extinct species in the coming years. So first of all, just to kind of talk about what makes something likely to become an endangered or threatened species, and here are the characteristics. Typically these are larger animals that are slower because they're easier to catch, right? They're tasty, so a lot of times people are looking for these species as food, or they might have something valuable like ivory that we are trying to get and sell, or they might have something that make them easy to kill. So a lot of endangered species are becoming endangered because of humans either intentionally or unintentionally killing them. So here's just two examples. One is a tiger, and those numbers there, less than 60, that's how many tigers are left in the world, in the wild. So that's an estimation, but it's just meant to be just kind of a shocking number to think about. Like, there's just a few of these animals left. Same thing with the Mexican gray wolf. There's an estimated just 60 left. They're very, very close to becoming extinct. And this little graph kind of shows you just how many different plants and animals are affected. You can see over 70% of plants are threatened with extinction. We rarely even talk about endangered plants. So it's a huge concern right now that's not getting a whole lot of publicity. So these are the 6 main causes of endangered species. And there are 6 that we talked about in class, but I wanted to talk about them a little more in depth so that you have some more thorough understanding of these concepts. So we're going to talk about each one individually, but they are habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation, invasives, or in other words, non-native species, population and resource use, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation. And we'll talk about what each one of those means. So first of all, habitats. Habitat destruction means destroying a habitat, so like cutting down all the trees to make a mall or something. Degradation would mean changing the habitat in some way. For example, like a lot of the grasslands in the United States have been replaced with farmlands. So we've just changed it in a way that the animals that used to be native can no longer live there. And fragmentation is something we talk about a lot. Fragmentation means dividing something into fragments or breaking it into pieces. Humans do that a lot when they build roads through habitats. And this is important because loss of habitat is the biggest reason why more and more species are becoming endangered and extinct. So, all the other reasons are important too, but this one has the greatest impact on these species. Just to talk a little bit more about habitat fragmentation, and you can see kind of in the picture, so this was a habitat as it used to be, and then pretend like someone tried to build a road through this habitat. It changes the type of animals that live there, and it leaves these little habitat islands. What that can do is it can break up the migration routes of certain animals. It can divide these populations so that they're no longer all living together. It prevents a lot of animals from finding food. So you can see these big bears fell out of the picture in this second picture because they were no longer able to find food in these little communities. They needed the whole big habitat in order to find enough food for themselves. Here's just another example. The light purple is the range of these animals, what they used to be 100 years ago. So you can see that it was quite large. And now the pink is the range of these animals today. So a lot of that is because we've either taken away their habitat by cutting down like rainforest, or we have done this habitat fragmentation where we just change their habitat in such a way that they can no longer move throughout it the way they used to. The next concept is invasive species. You might also hear these called introduced species or non-native species. They all mean the same thing, and what it is a plant or animal that is not native to an area, which means didn't live there naturally. It was introduced in some way, and these tend to spread at alarming rates. They tend to grow very, very quickly, exponential growth. So a lot of times these species are introduced for reasons that seemed beneficial at the start. So we might bring in plants for food, or we might bring in plants for our shelter or medicine, or just we want them to look nice in our yard. Same thing with animals. However, the bad thing about that is that these non-native species might have no natural predators, so there's nothing there that could that wants to hunt and eat them, so they would just grow exponentially. Same thing, they might not have any competitors, so if you bring in an aggressive herbivore and nothing else is competing for that herbivore's food, it's just going to eat everything it comes across. They might also not have any parasites or pathogens or other things to kill them, just all contributing to them growing really fast and really changing the ecosystem. So for example, the kudzu, this is a huge problem in the south, which is where I lived for a time. This was imported from Japan. It looks a lot like ivy, but it's now called the vine that ate the south, so it's just taken over. You can see it took over this house, which is not like such a big deal. We could just cut it down, but a larger problem is that it's like wrapping around trees and then suffocating the trees, and they are dying, and so it's taking out forest. And it's a big problem. You can't kill it as fast as it grows. People are saying, maybe there could be benefits of having this kudzu. We could try to find a positive use for it. And so there are some of those, but right now it's just kind of a huge problem that is growing too fast for people to deal with it. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is population and resource use growth. So as the human population is growing, we need more things. And so we've talked about tragedy of the commons before, and that's basically saying that same situation. As we grow more and more as a society, we're taking more and more resources. So you can see up here, like as the population grows, then the resource use is going to increase because we need more resources. And then, poverty is kind of a big part of this too, is that, we have so many people and we can't provide for all of them. And then because of that, we are taking up more and more habitats, as we talked about, degrading them and fragmenting them, causing a lot more pollution, and just all of these things are directly related to our population is growing. So if we had less people, we would actually probably do less damage to the environment, but we have what we have. The fourth reason why humans are contributing to endangered species is pollution. So pollution, the definition is just introducing contaminants into the natural environment, so putting something into the environment that wasn't supposed to be there, usually like a man-made chemical. And a huge example that we normally talk about is from farms. So when the pesticides and fertilizers from farms run off into water sources, then they can create these dead zones. So it creates an algae bloom that then kills, takes up all the oxygen, kills all the animals in that ecosystem. And here is an example you can see below of a red tide. So that's a huge algae bloom. All that red stuff is algae, and it's just kind of taking over, and eventually it'll leave nothing behind. And those are typically caused from, like I said, pesticides and fertilizers from farms. And the next reason we're going to talk about that's causing endangered species is climate change. So the definition, and we've talked about this before, is the change in climate, so change in temperature and rainfall patterns, due to increased levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So as we talked about, as humans are doing more burning of fossil fuels, we're creating more greenhouse gases, and that's contributing to climate change. So some of the effects of climate change that are affecting endangered plants and animals is, one, of course, that average temperatures are going up, and as temperatures goes up, animals' habitats are starting to change, so plants can no longer grow where they used to grow if they were used to growing at a certain temperature. This also changes migration patterns, because lots of animals migrate based on temperature and time of year, and so their migration patterns are getting thrown off. The increased heat leads to melting ice caps, which leads to loss of habitat for a lot of animals. Also, as the ice caps melt, the sea levels rise and the ocean, the content of the ocean changes. It becomes less salty, so that can change a lot of the habitats for animals. There's more extreme weather events, like drought, floods, hurricanes, which again can destroy habitats both for humans and for animals. And then ocean acidification, which means the ocean's getting more acidic because of all the carbon dioxide. And that too changes the water ecosystems because animals and plants are used to living in a certain pH. And so if we make it more acidic, they can no longer live there. And here's just an example, one that most people talk about. So when we talk about melting ice caps, it's hard not to talk about the polar bears. So they're one thing that's really being affected because their habitat is shrinking, and they require these ice caps to find their food and survive. So some estimates are saying that the polar bears could be gone by 2100. So within the span of our lifetime, they could disappear. And finally, overexploitation, which is the illegal killing, capturing, and selling of wild species. So this is where a lot of poaching and hunting of animals comes in. So a lot of times people do that because they're looking for animal parts like ivory, which we can use for jewelry and for lots of things really, pelts and skins, which people use for clothing and for like blankets and such, and exotic meat. There's a market for people who want to eat different types of animals, and then a lot of people catch and sell animals as pets. Some people want a monkey. They might go out and capture a monkey and sell it to someone. And then a lot of people are getting plants for landscaping their yards. They just want exotic plants in their yards. So all of this is leading to more and more animals dying because we're catching and selling them for our own profit. So just an example. It's kind of sad, we won't dwell here, but here's a rhinoceros killed for its tusks. And then an example of a bird also killed. They kill them for their feathers and for meat. And then also sometimes they capture them live and sell these guys as pets, or as they sell them to like zoos and other places that want to put animals on display. And so they'll capture them out of their native habitats. So I know it's kind of dark, but it's good to know how our actions are affecting other species in the world. So the big idea is, again, just that human actions are contributing to endangered species in these 6 ways. So we're changing their habitats, introducing invasive species that go out of control. Our human population is taking up more resources than we're leaving behind. There's lots of pollution, climate change, and overexploitation, all of which are harming the plants and animals around us. So something to think about. And so, I know it ends kind of dark here, but I promise when we get back to class, we're going to talk about, like, okay, what can we do to change this and really turn things around for the better? So start thinking about that, and I will see you in class.